The pristine white walls of the containment chamber seemed to mock Nari as she traced her fingers along its smooth surface. Her iridescent scales, once gleaming with the colors of 1,000 stars, had dulled to a pale shimmer during her decade of imprisonment. The Krith Empire's most prestigious research facility kept her in what they called optimal conditions, but she knew it for what it was, a cage, no matter how beautifully designed. Outside her crystalline prison, 3 Krith scientists walked past, their metallic tablets reflecting the harsh overhead lights. They barely glanced at her, just another specimen in their vast collection. Nari watched them through the transparent walls, noting how their scaled bodies moved with the artificial precision that marked their species. Their eyes, vertical slits of amber, held no emotion as they recorded their daily observations. Specimen L274 continues to display normal behavioral patterns. One of them spoke into their recording device. No signs of deterioration in light manipulation abilities, though attempts to use them remain unsuccessful due to containment protocols. Nari turned away from them, her shoulders slumping as she retreated to the corner of her chamber where a simple sleeping pad lay. The Krith had designed every aspect of her prison to redirect and nullify her natural abilities to bend light. Any attempt to use her powers only resulted in the energy being absorbed and dispersed through the crystalline structure of her cage. She remembered the day they came to her homeworld. The Lumini had been a peaceful species, using their gift of light manipulation for art and healing. They had no weapons, no armies. The Krith vessels had darkened their skies, their ships blocking out the triple suns that gave life to her people. The invasion lasted less than a day. Nari had been a healer, working in one of the floating cities that had once graced their world. She still saw it in her dreams, the graceful spires of crystal and light, the bridges made of pure energy that connected their homes, the gardens where light itself seemed to bloom like flowers. The Krith had destroyed it all, claiming the Lumini's abilities made them too dangerous to remain free. A soft chime indicated feeding time. A section of the wall shimmered, and a tray of nutrient cubes materialized. The food was designed to keep her healthy, but like everything else in her prison, it was devoid of joy or flavor. Nari picked up one of the cubes, its surface gleaming with artificial perfection. "You should eat all of it today, L274. A voice came through the chamber's communication system. "Your last 3 meals were only partially consumed. This is inefficient." The voice belonged to Keeper Voss, one of the few Krith who regularly spoke to her. His tone always carried that same mix of scientific detachment and subtle threat. The Krith valued efficiency above all else, and even their cruelty was calculated and precise. Nari forced herself to eat, knowing that refusing would only result in forced feeding protocols. She had learned that lesson in her first year of captivity, along with many others. The Krith didn't punish out of anger. They simply adjusted conditions to ensure optimal specimen preservation. As she ate, her mind wandered to the others like her. Through the walls of her chamber, she could sometimes glimpse other containment units, species from across the galaxy, each with unique abilities the Krith deemed too valuable or dangerous to leave free. Some had been here longer than her, their spirits broken by years of methodical observation and experimentation. The facility itself was a marvel of engineering, a testament to the Krith Empire's technological supremacy. Built into an asteroid at the edge of their core systems, it housed the Empire's most valuable biological specimens. Security was absolute, automated defense systems, quantum blocks, and guards armed with weapons that could incapacitate any known species. Nari had tried to escape 372 times in her first 5 years. Each attempt was meticulously documented by the Krith, who used the data to further improve their containment protocols. They never punished her for trying. They simply adapted, making each subsequent attempt more impossible than the last. The last light cycle was ending, and the chamber's illumination began to dim. Nari lay down on her sleeping pad, staring at the ceiling where patterns of light danced in predetermined sequences. The Krith claimed it was designed to provide psychological comfort. To her, it was just another reminder of the freedom they had stolen from her people. As darkness settled in her chamber, Neri did what she had done every night for 10 years. She reached out with her abilities, trying to touch the light that always danced just beyond her reach. The chamber's walls absorbed her effort, transforming her power into nothing more than a slight shimmer in the crystalline structure. But tonight, something felt different. Through the walls of her prison, she could hear the Krith guards talking in unusually animated tones. Their normally measured voices carried notes of concern, even fear. Neri pressed herself against the crystal surface, straining to hear their words. Another outpost lost. One guard was saying, "The humans are advancing faster than predicted." "Impossible," another responded. "They are primitive. Their technology is centuries behind ours. Tell that to the garrison at Sector 7. No survivors." Humans. Neri had heard whispers of this species before, but the Krith had always dismissed them as insignificant. Yet something in the guards' voices suggested that these humans were different from the other species the Empire had conquered. For the first time in years, Neri felt something stir in her chest, a feeling she had thought long dead. It wasn't hope, not quite. But as she lay in her darkness, listening to the worried voices of her captors, she allowed herself to imagine that perhaps the universe still held surprises that even the mighty Krith Empire couldn't predict or control. The soft hum of the facility's systems surrounded her as she drifted off to sleep, her dreams filled with memories of freedom and new visions of mysterious beings who dared to challenge the empire that had stolen everything from her. The first signs of change came in small ways, like ripples in a still pond. Neri noticed it in the hurried steps of the Krith guards, in the tense discussions that echoed through the facility's corridors, and in the way the scientists checked their data screens with increasing frequency. Something was disturbing the Empire's carefully maintained order. "Another human attack," a guard muttered as he passed her chamber. "Third one this cycle." His companion clicked his teeth, a rare display of Krith agitation. Neri pressed closer to the crystal wall, her dulled scales reflecting the soft light as she strained to hear more. Over the past weeks, she had gathered fragments of information about these humans, piecing together a picture of a species that defied Krith expectations. The facility's main view screen, visible from her chamber, now regularly displayed battle footage and tactical assessments. She watched as human ships, smaller and less advanced than Krith vessels, executed maneuvers that the Empire's tactical computers struggled to predict. Their attacks seemed random, chaotic even, but Neri began to see patterns in their apparent disorder. "They should have been easy to subjugate," one of her regular observers complained, forgetting for a moment that specimens weren't supposed to be engaged in conversation. "Their technology is primitive. Their societies are divided. They barely achieved faster-than-light travel 2 decades ago." But the humans weren't following the Krith's carefully calculated models of species development. They adapted too quickly, learned too fast. When the Empire blocked their communications, they created new ones. When their shields were penetrated, they developed countermeasures within days instead of the predicted years. One morning, the facility shook with the arrival of a high-priority transport. Through her walls, Neri watched as Krith soldiers escorted a damaged containment pod to the research wing. Inside was something she had never seen before, a human. The creature was smaller than a Krith, with soft-looking skin and no scales. Its uniform was torn and stained, but it held itself with a dignity that impressed even the guards. Unlike other captured species, it showed neither fear nor despair. "You're making a mistake," the human said through the translation field, its voice carrying an unfamiliar emotion. "We won't stop coming. Every ship you destroy teaches us more about how to fight you." The Krith scientists dismissed the words as primitive bravado, but Neri saw something in the human's eyes that she recognized. The same fire that had burned in her people before the Empire extinguished it. Days turned into weeks, and the reports of human activities grew more frequent. They weren't just fighting the Empire. They were freeing other species, forming alliances, sharing technology. The Krith response was predictably methodical. They increased security, reinforced their holdings, and prepared for what they saw as a minor inconvenience to their expansion. But the humans proved unpredictable. They attacked heavily defended positions while leaving obvious targets untouched. They used outdated technology in ways the Krith had never considered. Most disturbing to the Empire, they showed concern for species the Krith considered mere specimens. Neri began to notice changes in the facility's routine. More guards were posted, security protocols were upgraded, and the scientists spent less time on research and more on defense preparations. The Krith were worried, though they would never admit it. Their empathy is their weakness, she overheard one administrator saying. They waste resources trying to protect inferior species. It will be their downfall. Yet the humans kept advancing. Through fragments of conversations and glimpses of tactical displays, Nari learned of their victories. They had developed shields that could withstand Krith weapons, adapted their ships to match the Empire's speed. And most importantly, they had begun to understand how the Krith thought. The captured human had been right. Every defeat seemed to make them stronger. The Empire's carefully maintained order was being disrupted by a species that refused to follow the rules of galactic conquest. One night, as the facility's lights dimmed for the sleep cycle, Nari heard something new in the guards' conversations. Fear, not the calculated concern of resource management or the irritation of dealing with an unexpected problem, but genuine fear. They found another research facility. A guard whispered, "Freed everything inside. Just let them all go. No experimentation, no study, just freedom." "Wasteful," his companion replied, but the word lacked conviction. Neri felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Anticipation. The humans' actions didn't make sense to the Krith because they operated on different principles. Where the Empire saw specimens to be studied, humans saw beings to be freed. The facility's automated systems continued their endless cycle of tests and observations, but now there was a new tension in the air. Extra defensive batteries were installed. Emergency protocols were updated. The Krith were preparing for something they hadn't faced in centuries, a genuine threat to their control. Through it all, Neri watched and listened. She saw the confusion in her captors' eyes when they reviewed reports of human behavior. She heard the frustration in their voices as they tried to predict what these unpredictable beings would do next. And for the first time since her capture, she began to think about what freedom might really mean. Not the desperate escape attempts of her early imprisonment, but real, lasting freedom. The humans weren't just fighting the Empire, they were challenging its fundamental beliefs about how the galaxy should be ordered. As she lay on her sleeping pad that night, Neri looked at her reflection in the crystal walls. Her scales might have dulled, but something in her eyes had brightened. The humans had achieved something she had thought impossible. They had made the Krith Empire question its own certainties. The facility's systems hummed their unchanging song of containment and control, but now they seemed less permanent, less absolute. Somewhere out there, humans were fighting not just for themselves, but for every species the Empire had caged and catalogued. For the first time in 10 years, Nari allowed herself to truly hope. Not the desperate hope of her early captivity, but something stronger and more certain. The universe was changing, and even the perfect order of the Krith Empire couldn't stop it. She closed her eyes, but not in resignation as she had so many nights before. Instead, she listened to the worried whispers of her captors and smiled. The humans were coming, and with them, the possibility of something the Empire had never understood. Freedom freely given, not taken or controlled, but shared among all who wished to live in the light. The first explosion rocked the facility with such force that Neri's crystalline prison vibrated like a struck bell. Warning sirens pierced the air, their perfect harmonics shattering into chaos. Red emergency lights flooded the corridors, casting strange shadows through the transparent walls of her cage. Krith guards rushed past her chamber, their usual measured movements replaced by something close to panic. Their scaled armor glinted under the flashing lights as they took up defensive positions. Through the confusion, Nari heard the distinctive sound of the facility's automated defense systems activating. Multiple breaches detected. The facility's AI announced in its emotionless voice. Unknown vessels approaching. Security protocols engage. More explosions followed, closer this time. The perfect order of the research facility dissolved into mayhem as alarms blared and security barriers slammed into place. Nari pressed herself against the crystal wall, watching as her captors faced something they had never expected. A direct assault on one of their most secure installations. The first human she saw was moving like a shadow through the smoke-filled corridor. Their armor was different from the Kriths. Darker, more practical, without the ornate styling the Empire favored. The soldier moved with a fluid grace that made the Kriths' precise movements seem stiff and predictable. Plasma bolts lit up the hallway as the guards opened fire. The human didn't retreat as expected. Instead, they rolled forward, coming up with a weapon that fired projectiles the facility's shields hadn't been designed to stop. 2 guards fell before they could adjust their defenses. More humans appeared, working in pairs that covered each other with practiced efficiency. Their tactics confused the Krith, who were used to enemies that either charged forward or fell back. These warriors did neither, instead flowing around threats like water around rocks. Section 3 compromised, the AI reported. Specimen containment protocols failing. Nari watched as the humans methodically cleared the corridor. They checked each chamber they passed, but they weren't destroying them. Instead, they appeared to be documenting everything with small devices attached to their helmets. A tall human stopped in front of her chamber, and for the first time, Nari found herself face to face with one of these mysterious beings. The soldier's helmet retracted, revealing features that were both alien and somehow familiar. Dark eyes studied her, with an intensity that held none of the clinical detachment she was used to from the Krith. "Park, we've got a live one here," the soldier called out, their voice carrying an emotion Nari hadn't heard in years. Concern. Another human joined the first, this one's armor bearing different markings. The nameplate read Park, and when their helmet retracted, Nari saw a face that would change her life forever. "Life signs stable," Park said, consulting a device. "Looks like some kind of containment field. Hang on, we're getting you out of there." The words took a moment to register in Nari's mind. 10 years of imprisonment had taught her not to trust in rescue, but something in Park's voice made her believe. The humans worked quickly, placing small devices around her chamber's control panel. Their movements were precise but not mechanical like the Kriths. They adapted to each challenge, changing their approach when their first attempts failed. "Facility security forces approaching from Section 6, someone reported. 5 minutes max." Park nodded, fingers flying over the control panel. "Won't need that long. Stand clear. This might get messy." The explosion that followed was smaller than Nari expected, perfectly calculated to disable the lock without damaging the chamber itself. The crystal wall shimmered, and then simply ceased to be a barrier. For the first time in 10 years, no barrier stood between Nari and freedom. She stepped forward cautiously, her legs trembling from both weakness and disbelief. Park caught her arm as she stumbled, supporting her with a gentleness she had forgotten existed. "Easy there. Let's get you out of here." The corridor looked different from outside her prison. Smoke hung in the air, and the emergency lights cast everything in shades of red. The sounds of battle echoed from other sections of the facility. "Can you walk?" Park asked, still supporting her. When Nari nodded, they handed her a small device. "Emergency shield, just in case." More explosions rocked the facility as the human team moved through the corridors. They maintained a formation around Nari, protecting her while efficiently dealing with any resistance they encountered. Their weapons were less advanced than the Kriths, but they used them with a skill that made technology gaps irrelevant. "Command, this is Park. We've got survivors. Requesting immediate evacuation." The response came through clearly enough for Nari to hear. "Acknowledged. Extraction point Bravo is secure. Be advised, heavy resistance en route." They encountered that resistance 2 corridors later. A squad of Krith elite guards had set up a defensive position, their energy shields creating a seemingly impenetrable barrier. In the past, Nari had seen many species throw themselves against Krith defenses, always with the same result. But the humans did something different. Instead of attacking directly, they split up, using the corridor's architecture in ways the Krith hadn't considered possible. "Now," Park commanded, and the team moved as one. Small devices skittered across the floor, releasing smoke that the Krith's sensors couldn't penetrate. The humans, apparently able to see through it, struck from multiple angles simultaneously. The fight was over in seconds. The Krith's perfect formation had been turned against them, their overlapping fields of fire becoming a weakness rather than a strength. As they moved past the disabled guards, Nari noticed something else about her rescuers. They weren't killing unless they had to. Krith soldiers who surrendered were quickly but carefully restrained, their weapons secured but their lives spared. "Extraction point 30 seconds ahead," someone reported. "Better hurry. Facility's core is going critical." They emerged into a docking bay where a human ship waited, its design unlike anything Nari had seen before. It was smaller than Krith vessels, but it hummed with power that she could feel in her bones. Park helped her aboard, still supporting her when her legs threatened to give out. The ship's interior was crowded with other rescued specimens, beings from a dozen different worlds, all watching their rescuers with the same mix of disbelief and hope that Nari felt. "All units, report," Park called out as the ship's engines powered up. All teams accounted for. 28 specimens rescued. Data cores secured. The ship lifted off smoothly, accelerating away from the facility that had been Nari's prison for so long. Through a viewport, she watched as other human vessels emerged from hiding, their formation protecting the rescue ships as they retreated. The Krith facility, that symbol of the Empire's power and control, grew smaller behind them. Its perfect symmetry was now marred by the signs of battle, proof that even the most secure prison could be breached by those with enough determination and courage. Park sat down beside her, offering a container of water. "You're safe now," they said simply. "The Empire won't cage you again." Nari took the water with trembling hands, feeling the last chains of her captivity beginning to fall away. The humans had done more than just break into a Krith facility. They had shattered the myth of the Empire's invincibility. As the ship jumped to faster than light speed, carrying her toward freedom, Nari realized that she was witnessing something historic. The humans hadn't just rescued prisoners. They had proven that the Krith could be beaten, that their perfect order could be broken by beings who valued freedom more than power. The raid was over, but Nari knew this was just the beginning. The universe was changing, and she had been given a chance to be part of that change. As she looked around at her fellow rescued specimens and their human liberators, she felt something she had almost forgotten. The feeling of hope, unbound and unlimited, stretching out toward a future full of possibilities. The human rescue ship sped through space, its engines humming with power as it carried Nari and the other freed specimens away from their prison. The vessel's interior was unlike the sterile perfection of Krith design. It was functional, lived in, with marks of use that spoke of real people rather than perfect machines. Nari sat in a small medical bay, watching as human medics tended to the rescued beings. Their methods were different from the Krith's clinical procedures. These healers spoke softly to their patients, explained what they were doing, and asked for permission before treating anyone. Park entered the medical bay, helmet tucked under one arm. The soldier's armor showed scorch marks from the fighting, but their movements remained steady and sure. "How are you holding up?" they asked, pulling up a chair beside Nari's bed. Before she could answer, the ship's emergency alerts blared to life. Red warning lights pulsed through the corridors as the captain's voice came over the speakers. Multiple Krith vessels detected. All hands to battle stations. "Stay here," Park ordered, but Nari was already standing. 10 years of helplessness had been enough. "I can help," she said, her voice stronger than she expected. "I know Krith tactics, they're blind spots." Park studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Follow me." They made their way to the bridge, where organized chaos reigned. Human crew members moved with practiced efficiency, preparing for the coming fight. Through the main viewport, Nari could see 3 Krith pursuit vessels closing in, their sleek forms cutting through space like predatory fish. "They're using standard pursuit formation," Nari said, recognizing the pattern. "They'll try to force us into their crossfire." The ship's captain, a woman whose nameplate read Chin, turned to them. "Can we break through?" "Not directly," Nari replied. "But their sensors have a weakness. My people discovered it long ago, but the Krith never believed we would dare use it against them." She explained quickly how the Lumini had once used their light manipulation abilities to confuse Krith targeting systems. The humans listened intently, already adapting their plans to this new information. "We can modify our deflector shields to create a similar effect," the ship's engineer suggested. "It won't be as perfect as natural light manipulation, but it might be enough to get us past them." They worked quickly, human ingenuity combining with Nari's knowledge. The ship's systems were reprogrammed, power rerouted to create the effect they needed. It wasn't elegant like Krith technology, but it had a resourcefulness that Nari was learning to appreciate. The first Krith shots came just as they finished the modifications. The human ship dove and weaved, its movements unpredictable in a way that confused the Empire's targeting computers. Nari felt the deck vibrating beneath her feet as they pushed the engines to their limits. "Deflectors at maximum," someone reported. "Light distortion field active." Through the viewport, Nari watched as their ship seemed to split into multiple images, each one perfect enough to fool Krith sensors. The pursuit vessels hesitated, their perfect formation faltering as they tried to determine which target was real. "Now," Captain Chen ordered. Their ship shot forward, threading the needle between 2 Krith vessels. The Empire's ships tried to adjust, but their responses were too measured, too predictable. By the time they realized which image was the real ship, the humans had broken through their formation. But the Krith weren't finished. More ships appeared ahead, emerging from hyperspace to cut off their escape route. The Empire had committed significant forces to recapture their precious specimens. "We can't outrun them all," Park said, studying the tactical display. "We need something they won't expect." Nari looked at the sensor readings, seeing something the others had missed. There, she pointed to a nearby stellar phenomenon. "A radiation cloud. The Krith will never follow us in there. Their ships aren't shielded for that kind of exposure." "Neither is ours," the engineer pointed out. "But we can modify the shields," Nari insisted. "Use the same principle we just did, but reverse it. Instead of scattering light, we concentrate it." It was dangerous, the kind of plan the Krith would never attempt because it couldn't be perfectly calculated. But the humans didn't hesitate. They adjusted their shields, reinforced critical systems, and prepared for something that had never been tried before. The ship plunged into the radiation cloud, its modified shields creating a tunnel of focused energy around them. Behind them, the Krith vessels pulled up short, unwilling to risk their perfect ships in such unpredictable conditions. Warnings blared throughout the ship as radiation levels rose. The shields flickered, straining to maintain the protective bubble around them. Nari worked with the human crew, making constant adjustments to keep them alive as they pushed through the deadly cloud. "Hull integrity at 60%, someone called out. 50%, 40%. Park grabbed Nari's arm as the ship shuddered violently. "If this doesn't work." "It will," she replied, surprising herself with her certainty. The Krith think in straight lines. Sometimes, the only way forward is to curve. The radiation cloud seemed to go on forever, but Nari knew they had to be nearing the other side. The ship's systems were failing one by one, power being diverted to maintain the shields that kept them alive. Then suddenly, they were through. The ship burst out of the cloud into clear space, its hull scorched but intact. Behind them, The radiation barrier stood between them and their pursuers, a barrier the Krith wouldn't dare to cross. The bridge erupted in cheers, humans celebrating their escape with an openness of emotion that still surprised Nari. She felt Park's hand on her shoulder, steady and reassuring. "That was either brilliant or crazy," the soldier said with a grin. "Maybe both. Sometimes crazy is what you need," Nari replied, understanding now why the humans had been so successful against the Empire. They weren't bound by the need for perfection, willing to take risks that the Krith would never consider. As the ship's systems recovered and repair crews got to work, Nari looked out at the stars. For the first time in 10 years, she was truly free. But it was more than just escape. She had found people who saw the universe differently, who fought not for perfect order, but for the right of all beings to choose their own path. Captain Chen approached them, her uniform showing signs of the battle they'd just survived. "We'll reach safe space in about 6 hours. After that, you'll all have choices to make about your futures." Choices. The word itself felt strange to Nari, after so long having every moment controlled and measured. She looked at Park, at the other humans who had risked their lives to free beings they had never met, and knew what her choice would be. The ship moved steadily through space, carrying its cargo of freed beings toward safety. But for Nari, this wasn't just an ending to her captivity, it was a beginning. She had broken free not just from physical imprisonment, but from the Krith's limited view of what was possible. As they traveled toward human space, Nari began to understand that true freedom wasn't just about breaking chains. It was about choosing your own path, even when that path led somewhere unexpected. The humans had shown her that, and she was ready to learn more. The human settlement on New Terra wasn't anything like Nari had imagined during her years of captivity. Unlike the sterile perfection of Krith facilities or the crystalline cities of her homeworld, this place was a vibrant mix of different architectural styles, technologies, and species all coexisting in organized chaos. Park walked beside her as they made their way through the bustling streets. Humans and aliens moved past them, some hurrying on important business, others simply enjoying their freedom to move about as they pleased. No guards, no containment fields, no constant surveillance, just people living their lives. "It's overwhelming at first," Park said, noticing her hesitation at a busy intersection. "But you'll get used to it. Freedom can be messy sometimes." They entered a building that served as the human military's command center. Unlike Krith command structures, this one had windows looking out over the city and doors that opened for anyone who approached. Security existed, but it wasn't the oppressive presence Nari had known for so long. Commander Lee was waiting for them in her office, a space that reflected both military precision and personal touches. Another concept foreign to the Krith. "Welcome to New Terra," she said, gesturing for them to sit. "How are you adjusting?" "It's different," Nari replied carefully, still learning to express her thoughts freely. "Everything here is different. That's what makes us strong," Lee said, bringing up a holographic display of local space. "The Krith believe in perfect order. We believe in adaptation, in learning from each other." The commander explained how humans had been gathering allies among the species the Krith had subjugated or studied. Each brought their own knowledge, their own ways of thinking. Instead of forcing them to conform to a single standard, the humans encouraged diversity. "We need your help," Lee continued. "Your knowledge of Krith systems, combined with your natural abilities, could save many lives." Nari studied the tactical display, seeing patterns in the Krith fleet movements that the humans might have missed. But something held her back, years of conditioning to never reveal weaknesses in Empire systems. Park seemed to sense her hesitation. "It's your choice," they said quietly. "That's what we're fighting for, the right to choose." The concept of choice was still new to Nari. The Krith had never offered choices, only commands disguised as scientific necessity. But here was a human commander, asking rather than ordering, offering rather than demanding. "Why do you fight them?" Nari asked suddenly. "Your technology isn't as advanced. Your numbers are smaller. The logical choice would be to submit. Lee smiled, not offended by the question. Because freedom isn't logical. Because every species deserves the right to determine their own path, even if that path is messy or inefficient by Krith standards. Over the next few days, Nari began working with the human military, sharing what she knew about Krith tactics and technology. Each time she revealed something, she expected punishment. It was deeply ingrained after years of conditioning. But the humans only offered thanks and asked if she needed anything. Park spent time with her between missions, explaining human concepts that the Krith had dismissed as primitive. Things like individual rights, democracy, and the idea that strength could come from cooperation rather than control. "Your people were artists," Park said one evening as they watched the sunset from a rooftop garden. "The Krith saw that as weakness, but we see it as strength. Different perspectives make us all stronger." Nari found herself sharing stories of her homeworld, of the light sculptures her people had created, of the healing arts they had developed. Instead of dismissing these as inefficient uses of abilities, the humans were fascinated. Their scientists were already working on ways to combine Lumini light manipulation with human technology. "We're not perfect," Park admitted during one of their conversations. "We make mistakes, we argue, we sometimes go backward before moving forward. But we learn from each other." That's something the Krith never understood. Trust built slowly, like a dawn breaking after a long night. Nari learned to voice her opinions in strategy meetings, to question assumptions, to suggest alternatives that the Krith would never have considered. The humans didn't just tolerate this. They encouraged it. She watched as human ships were modified with elements of Lumini design, becoming more effective against Krith defenses. Her people's artistic understanding of light was being transformed into a weapon, but one aimed at freeing others rather than controlling them. "Your knowledge has already saved lives," Lee told her after a successful mission to free another research facility. "But more importantly, you're helping us understand how to fight them better." The commander showed her reports from across human space. Other freed species were also contributing, each bringing their own unique perspectives to the fight. The Krith's perfect order was being challenged by an alliance that celebrated imperfection and difference. One morning, Nari woke to find she no longer flinched at unexpected movements. She walked through the city without constantly looking for escape routes. She spoke in meetings without waiting for permission. Small changes, but significant ones. "You're different," Park observed during one of their regular meetings. "Stronger." "I'm free," Nari replied, understanding finally what that really meant, not just from the cage, but from thinking like them. The humans had given her more than physical freedom. They had shown her that strength could come in many forms, that efficiency wasn't always the highest goal, that trust and cooperation could accomplish things that perfect control never could. As she worked with the human military, helping plan operations to free more of her people and others like them, Nari realized she had found something the Krith had never understood, a cause worth fighting for, freely chosen rather than imposed. The sun set over New Terra, painting the sky in colors that would have been considered wasteful by Krith standards. Nari stood with Park on their usual rooftop, watching the city below come alive with lights of all kinds. "Ready for tomorrow's mission?" Park asked. Nari nodded, feeling the weight of trust that had been placed in her. Not the cold calculation of Krith resource management, but real trust, freely given and freely returned. "We'll free them all," she said with quiet certainty. "Not because it's efficient or logical, but because it's right." Park smiled, understanding what those words meant coming from someone who had been taught that right and wrong were merely functions of efficiency. Welcome to the human way of thinking. The lights of the city below them were beautifully imperfect, a testament to the messy, vibrant freedom that the humans fought to protect. Nari had learned to trust not just them, but herself, and that, she now knew, was the greatest freedom of all. The war room hummed with activity as Nari studied the holographic display of Krith space. 6 months of freedom had changed her from a specimen into a key strategist in the human military. Her knowledge of Krith systems, combined with her people's understanding of light manipulation, had helped turn the tide of many battles. They're moving their research facilities deeper into Empire space, she pointed out, highlighting several transport routes. But they're making a mistake we can use. Commander Lee and Park stood with her around the tactical display, watching as she outlined the patterns she'd discovered. The Krith, in their drive for perfect efficiency, had become predictable. Their very strength, the need for order, had become a weakness. The facilities have to maintain certain conditions for their specimens, Nari explained. That means specific power signatures, specific supply routes. They can't hide them completely, not if they want to keep their specimens alive. Park nodded, understanding immediately, and every facility they move is one more trail we can follow. The plan they developed over the next few hours was unlike anything the Krith would expect. It combined human unpredictability with Lumini precision, creating something entirely new. The Empire's perfect defenses were designed to stop direct attacks. They weren't prepared for what Nari had in mind. It's risky, Lee said, but her eyes showed approval. The kind of plan the Krith would never attempt because they couldn't calculate all the variables. The operation began 3 days later. Human ships, modified with Lumini light-bending technology, slipped through Krith defense lines. Instead of attacking the facilities directly, they targeted the precise environmental systems that kept the specimens alive, not to harm them, but to force emergency protocols. Nari stood on the bridge of the lead ship, watching as her plan unfolded. The Krith responded exactly as she had predicted, following their predetermined emergency procedures. As each facility initiated its specimen protection protocols, it created tiny gaps in the Empire's perfect defense network. Phase 1 complete, Park reported from Tactical. Moving to Phase 2. The real attack came not from the ships the Krith could see, but from vessels hidden in artificial light distortion fields. While the Empire's forces responded to the apparent threat to their specimens, human strike teams slipped through their defenses. Nari's hands moved across the control panel, adjusting the light distortion fields as needed. This was art as much as warfare, using her people's gift to create passages through space itself. The Krith had never understood that light could be more than just illumination or energy. It could be a door, a shield, a path. The first facility fell within hours. The Krith defenders, trained to respond to direct assaults, found themselves facing attacks from directions they had deemed impossible. Human forces emerged from blind spots that shouldn't have existed, using technologies that combine multiple species' knowledge. Second facility secured. Lee's voice came through the comm. Beginning evacuation of specimens. As reports came in, Nari felt a fierce pride that had nothing to do with Krith notions of superiority. Each free being represented a victory not just over the Empire's forces, but over their entire way of thinking. The Krith finally realized the true nature of the attack, but their response was too rigid, too bound by protocols. They couldn't adapt quickly enough to counter tactics that defied their logical models. They're falling back to defensive pattern Sigma, Nari announced, recognizing the formation. Exactly as expected. Park smiled grimly. Because it's the most efficient response in their tactical database. They can't help themselves. The battle continued through space, a dance of light and shadow that the Empire had never prepared for. Human ships darted through gaps in Krith formations, their movements guided by Nari's understanding of how light could bend reality itself. But it wasn't just about military victory. Each facility they breached meant more beings freed, more knowledge shared, more allies gained. The Krith had spent centuries collecting specimens to study. Now those same beings were turning their unique abilities against their former captors. Primary target in range, the tactical officer reported, ready for final phase. Nari took a deep breath, knowing this was the moment everything depended on. The Krith's Central Research Coordination Facility lay before them, its defenses considered impenetrable by conventional standards. But they weren't using conventional methods. Begin synchronization, she ordered. Across the battle space, Freed Lumini on other ships joined their abilities with hers. Light itself seemed to bend and twist as they combined their power with human technology. The Krith's perfect sensors, designed to detect any normal form of energy or matter, were blind to what was happening. The facility's outer defenses fell first, their carefully calibrated shields useless against attacks coming from angles that shouldn't have existed. Inner security systems, programmed to respond to known threats, failed to recognize the danger until it was too late. "We're in," Park announced. "Strike teams deploying." Nari watched the tactical displays as human forces moved through the facility, freeing specimens and securing vital data. The Krith defenders fought back with their usual precision, but they couldn't counter what they couldn't predict. "Central control secured," Lee reported, downloading their research database now. The operation had succeeded beyond their most optimistic projections. Not only had they freed hundreds of specimens, but they had captured the very heart of the Krith's biological research program. Years of collected knowledge now turned to the cause of freedom rather than control. As the human fleet began its withdrawal, Nari felt something she had never experienced during her years of captivity: satisfaction. Not the cold pleasure of efficiency the Krith valued, but the warm knowledge that they had struck a real blow against the Empire's power. "The Krith will adapt," she said as they watched the facility shrink behind them. "They'll try to develop countermeasures." "Let them try," Park replied. "They'll be solving the wrong problem. They think this was about technology or tactics. They still don't understand that it's about something they can't measure or control." Nari nodded, understanding. The Empire's greatest weakness wasn't in their defenses or their technology. It was in their inability to comprehend why beings would choose freedom over perfection, cooperation over control. As their ships jumped to safety, carrying their freed cargo of specimens and data, Nari looked at the humans around her. They had done what the Krith had thought impossible, not through superior technology or perfect planning, but through their willingness to trust, to adapt, to try things that might fail. The counterstrike had done more than just damage the Empire's research program. It had proven that their perfect order could be broken, that their logical models could be defeated, that their power could be challenged. And for Nari, it was proof that she had found her true place, not as a specimen to be studied, but as a warrior fighting for something the Krith would never understand: the right of all beings to choose their own path, even if that path led to glorious imperfection. The three suns of Nari's homeworld painted the sky in shades of gold and amber as the human fleet emerged from hyperspace. She stood on the bridge of the flagship, her heart pounding as she saw the familiar rings of crystal cities, or what remained of them, floating in the perpetual dawn. Krith occupation forces had turned her people's artistic masterpieces into military installations, their delicate spires now bristling with weapon emplacements. But even their cold efficiency couldn't completely hide the beauty that had once been there. "Ready?" Park asked, standing beside her in full combat gear. Over the past year, the human soldier had become more than just an ally. They had become family in a way the Krith could never understand. "I've been ready for 10 years, Nari replied, checking her own equipment. The light-bending technology they'd developed combined Lumini abilities with human ingenuity, creating something neither species could have achieved alone. Commander Lee's voice came over the ship-wide comm. "All units, prepare for engagement. Remember, this isn't just about winning a battle. It's about showing the galaxy that freedom is stronger than control." The Krith responded to their arrival with typical precision, their defense fleet moving into mathematically perfect formations. But this time, they faced something their calculations couldn't account for: a force that combined the abilities and knowledge of dozens of species they had once kept as specimens. "Begin Phase 1, Lee ordered. Nari reached out with her powers, joining her abilities with other freed Lumini throughout the fleet. Light bent around human ships, creating false images that confused Krith targeting systems. Where the Empire's sensors showed perfect order, chaos reigned. The first shots were fired not by the largest ships, but by small, fast vessels that darted through gaps in Krith formations. They carried strike teams composed of humans and freed specimens, each bringing their unique abilities to the fight. Multiple breaches detected in their defensive line, the tactical officer reported. They're trying to adapt, but their responses are too predictable. Park squeezed Nari's shoulder before heading to the shuttle bay. See you on the surface. The battle for orbit became a dance of light and shadow. Human ships moved in patterns that defied Krith tactical databases, while freed specimens used abilities the Empire had studied but never truly understood. What the Krith had seen as subjects for research had become their greatest nightmare. Surface defenses weakening, Lee announced. Prepare for ground assault. Nari joined Park in the lead shuttle, her heart racing as they descended through the atmosphere. Below them, the crystal cities of her childhood glowed in the eternal twilight. Even after years of Krith occupation, they still held their beauty. The shuttle landed in what had once been a garden of light sculptures. Now it was a military staging area, but Nari could still feel the echoes of her people's art in the crystal structures around them. Move fast, stay unpredictable, Park reminded the strike team. The Krith expect order. Give them chaos instead. They advanced through the city, human soldiers and freed specimens working in perfect harmony. Where Krith defenders expected direct assaults, they found attacks from impossible angles. Where they looked for military precision, they found artistic improvisation. Nari led a group through passages the Krith didn't know existed, using her people's understanding of light to create paths through solid crystal. The Empire's perfect defenses meant nothing when their enemies could simply walk through walls. Command center ahead, she reported, recognizing the structure that had once been her people's greatest temple of healing. Heavy resistance expected. The Krith had fortified the building according to their tactical doctrine, covering every approach with overlapping fields of fire, but they hadn't considered that the building itself might turn against them. Nari reached out with her powers, connecting with other Lumini in the attack force. Together, they awakened the crystal structure's memory of what it had once been. Light began to flow through ancient channels the Krith had never detected. Now, Park ordered. The crystal temple responded to its true master's call. Light erupted from every surface, blinding Krith defenders and shorting out their perfect targeting systems. Human forces surged forward while freed specimens used their various abilities to overcome the Empire's defenses. The battle for the command center was fierce but quick. The Krith fought with their usual precision, but they couldn't adapt to enemies who changed tactics with every moment, who turned the very architecture against them. Central chamber secured, Park reported. Beginning system override. Nari worked with human technicians to disable the Empire's control networks. As each system fell, more of her people were freed from Krith suppression fields. The light of their combined powers grew stronger with each passing moment. Above them, the space battle reached its climax. The Krith fleet, unable to counter attacks that defied their tactical models, began to retreat. Their perfect formations broke apart as they faced weapons and strategies they had never prepared for. The Empire is withdrawing. Lee's voice came through their comms. Their remaining forces are jumping to hyperspace. A cheer went up from the human soldiers, but Nari's attention was on her people emerging from their forced servitude. Their scales began to shine again as they recovered their connection to light itself. We did it, Park said softly, watching as Lumini powers transformed the occupation infrastructure back into works of art. Your world is free. But it wasn't the same world Nari had left. The Krith occupation had changed things, just as her time with humans had changed her. The crystal cities would never again be purely Lumini creations. They would be something new, something that combined the best of multiple cultures. Not just free, she replied, watching as humans and Lumini worked together to restore damaged structures. Better. We understand now what the Krith never could. That true strength comes from embracing differences, not enforcing uniformity. In the days that followed, her homeworld began to heal. The Krith's military installations were transformed into centers of learning where different species could share their knowledge. The crystal cities once again became places of art and healing, but now they incorporated elements from dozens of cultures. Park stood with her on a balcony overlooking the largest city, watching the three suns paint the sky in colors the Krith would have considered inefficient. "What will you do now?" they asked. Neri smiled, her scales reflecting the light in ways that would have once been measured and classified. "Help others find their freedom," she said. "Show them what humans showed me, that every being deserves the chance to choose their own path." The liberation of her homeworld wasn't an ending, but a beginning. Throughout Krith's space, other specimens and subjugated species were rising up, inspired by the proof that the Empire's perfect order could be broken. The Krith thought they could control everything by studying it, measuring it, classifying it, she said. They never understood that the most powerful forces in the universe are the ones that can't be contained. As the sun set on the first day of true freedom, Neri looked at the humans who had made it possible. They weren't perfect like the Krith had tried to be. They made mistakes, argued, sometimes went backward before moving forward. But they understood something the Empire never would, that true strength comes not from controlling life, but from embracing all its beautiful imperfections. The light of three suns danced through crystal spires that now told a new story, not just of Lumini art or human courage, but of how freedom, once tasted, could never be forgotten. And in that light, Neri saw the future she would help build, one where no being would ever again be just a specimen to be studied, but rather a unique part of the great dance of life itself.